Colin, you're the only Irishman, I think I'm right in saying, to have painted the late Queen, Queen Elizabeth II.
That's right.
I mean, by the time you did that, you'd painted a host of other famous people, celebrities, whatever, statespeople. That must have been an utterly surreal experience, though, because this is somebody who is an icon. Her image is literally on the coins, it's on the stamps, it's everywhere. And you're sitting there with her there in Buckingham Palace.
It is. I mean, particularly for someone who never set out to be a portrait painter to start off with, you know, almost accidentally drifted into it, allowed the whims from left field to take me in a different direction. Yeah, and then suddenly I'm sitting in the yellow drawing room at 11 a.m. one morning in May 2016. The Irish Guards are playing outside for the changing of the guard, and I'm standing at the door, and the late Queen walks in and asks me how I am. And yeah, those are the pinch me times. Those are the times whenever you're truly out of your depth and you're going, the whole thing about being out of your depth is that it feels like there's a creative excitement in that place. But it also is, by virtue of you being out of your depth, it's a precarious place. You're not quite sure whether you're going to get this right. You're not quite sure what you're quite doing there. And it was remarkable. This was just around her 90th birthday. And it was a piece that Cooperation Ireland had commissioned me to make. Again, Mark was part of that process as well, because I met the late Queen and President Higgins at the Lyric in 2012 to start off with. But I think in all of the people who sit for me, there has to come a time for me as the artist in the encounter with them, in the engagement, where I am seeing them as a human being. I give myself a head start by choosing not to have any of the trappings as to what might conventionally make that person great or good. So in the Seamus Heaney portrait, I don't have him sitting behind a desk with a quill, or with the Bono painting that you talk about. I don't have him sitting with a microphone or a guitar behind him. Everybody is treated equally. And what I eventually got to see through just talking about stuff was a human being who had, the monarchy divides opinion big time. But here was a human being who had dedicated her life to something that she passionately believed in. And I kind of wanted to reflect that.
And there's two moments that you talk about, or two elements of that conversation, and you're careful to say that there are elements of it that you can't talk about because it was private. But there are two elements of it that you talk about in the book very personally. You say that you talked to the Queen about your stammer and the stammer which her father, King George VI, famously had and was portrayed in the film The King's Speech. That's almost, I almost feel intrusive asking about that, but that's something that you say there. And you then say at the end of the sitting that there was this other very powerful moment where you gave her a book which had images of your exhibition, Silent Testimony, and that's where you painted these 18 victims of the Troubles. And you say that she clearly engaged in that. She didn't hand it to somebody beside her to take away and put in a big pile with all of the other gifts I'm sure she was being given. She actually looked at it and studied it. So what was that experience like? I mean, you were there as a professional and you're doing your job, but you're also interacting with her as a human being.
Yeah. And also, I have a job of work to do. I need to make sure that the drawings I make are good enough and have enough information that when I go back to the studio to start the painting, the drawings capture what I need them to. The camera's there as well, and there's photographs too. But I was really struck. I mean, the bit that I talk about my stammer was actually in passing. It was kind of just part of the flow of the conversation. And I don't think, I mean, she understood what I was saying, but she didn't have much comment, I suppose, on that. But towards the end, whenever I handed her the silent testimony catalogue as a gift and explained to her what it was about, I was in no doubt how passionate she was about this part of the world. I think after her visit to the Republic in 2011, many of us were left in no doubt. And the generosity and the warmth with which she engaged was quite remarkable, I think. But it struck me as I handed the silent testimony catalogue to her, where I'd painted 18 people who suffered loss through the Troubles, it occurred to me that I could have painted her for it. That actually she did suffer personal family loss through the Troubles in this part of the world. And whether that trauma or that grief is ongoing for her, or was ongoing for her at the time, I'm not sure. But it made me think what a pretty seismic step it was for her as an individual who had suffered loss during the Troubles to make that gesture of coming to Ireland and speaking in the Irish tongue. And so I left Buckingham Palace that day feeling that I had encountered somebody of immense substance and depth and integrity.
And I'm not going to ask you about how you felt when that painting was unveiled, because you talk about it in the book and people can buy the book and find that out. However, Mark, you were there that night in Crosby Hall in central London, very grand house owned by the head of Cooperation Ireland at that point. And that must have been an extraordinary occasion, because Brexit had happened. This is late 2016. Brexit happened a few months beforehand. There's an awful lot going on in British-Irish relations and politics. And there's this extraordinary gathering of people to see what Colin has painted.
I mean, it was a remarkable occasion, and I was delighted to be there. Crosby Hall is a remarkable property. I think it's the largest private residence in London, right on the Thames on Cheney Walk in Chelsea. It's owned by Christopher Moran, who was the chair of Cooperation Ireland at the time, and he had nudged that whole process along. He had really made the painting happen. He was a friend of the Queen's, and he was involved in the event at the Lyric where Colin's paintings were shown to the Queen and Martin McGuinness and President Higgins, and the handshake took place that day. So that's the whole the germ of the painting came from that particular occasion. And being there that day was interesting because there were an awful lot of people in that room. Martin McGuinness was there, Arlene Foster was there, Mike Nesbitt was there. The Secretary of State was there, the Taoiseach was there, and the whole focus was on the painting. There's a great photograph in the book which is just captured just as the red silk cover is being pulled off by the Queen. You just see the first little piece of the painting. And I suppose I felt quite, I had no real reason to feel nervous, but I felt a bit nervous at that moment just to see what the reaction would be. Well, probably partly on behalf of Colin, who was standing beside the Queen and was told to speak to her as soon as it was fully unveiled. And it is an interesting story, and people can read it in the book. It all ended up very well because Colin's still here. But it was a remarkable thing because there was a lot of political balancing going on. And Martin McGuinness, if you remember back, in the serious point is that Martin McGuinness was criticised within Republican circles for being at Crosby Hall for the unveiling of a portrait of the Queen. And there were some people who clearly felt that it was just one step too far. And it wasn't fair. We were talking to Christopher Moran. We're just back off the plane from London where we had an event at the Irish Embassy, and Christopher Moran was there and he was reflecting on that. And, Mark, it wasn't long after that we became aware of the fact that Martin McGuinness was unwell and was, moving towards the end of his career. So it was depending on your point of view, it was maybe not the wisest thing for him to do to be there, or it was a very brave thing for him to be there, and maybe it was some kind of reciprocation for the fact that the Queen came and shook hands with him in the Lyric Theatre. But that is an important painting. And this was a point that the Irish ambassador made in London last night, because it marked a particular point in Anglo-Irish relations, and that was a particular high point. And then we had, real difficulties with Brexit not very long after that, if you remember. And there's an awful lot of effort has gone in on the part of Dublin and London to try to get things back to where they were on that night. But the guest list in London that night was really quite something. And I think the general reaction to that painting was a very positive one. And the painting now, in a way, it's a kind of a symbol of Anglo-Irish relations. The fact that the Queen sat for an Irish painter for the first time, and that painting now hangs in Hillsborough Castle, which seems an appropriate place for it to be.